You know, I hate the scheduling in college football, but I love to talk about the schedules. Does that make any sense? Well, we'll make sense of it all here in the next several minutes and maybe an hour here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. We invite you in to talk about the Big Ten schedule, which was re-released and announced on the Big Ten Network just a few minutes ago, actually at 1 o'clock Eastern time. I was not able to watch the Big Ten Network show. I just have the Big Ten schedule in front of me now, and we'll run through it week to week and let you know my thoughts about Big Ten football and the schedule release for 2021. Of course, I'm going to take your comments there in the live chat concerning anything in college football. I'm going to focus on the Big Ten schedule, but anything in college football, I'm always open to, even though the subject matter is Big Ten scheduling. And the phone lines are open as well. 860-325-3687, 860-325-3687. So I appreciate everybody being here, as this was a late add to the program schedule today, which included a Notre Dame live stream at 2 o'clock Eastern time that we just completed. So check out that conversation on the Fighting Irish. Coming up at 6 o'clock Eastern time, we're going live on Patreon. So the link is on the community section there if you go to my YouTube channel and you're here right now. So check it out. The Patreon link is right there, or it's in the description section of any of the videos. Go to that Patreon link. It is just about 16 cents a day. I haven't done the down to the fraction of a penny math. But if we round off 16 cents a day on Patreon, and you get exclusive live streams like we're delivering tonight at 6 o'clock Eastern time. And also, we have a Super Bowl prop bet, edge, near, lock guarantee for you based on what has transpired at the Super Bowl over the last 10 years. That's all I will say. And if you jump on Patreon, you get Steve Merrill's Super Bowl lock. Also, of course, you get the insider look at the voice of college football, which we will provide and do a much better job during the off season to keep you in tune with what is going on, and what we're doing here at the voice of college football. We did post some pictures about a week ago concerning some items here that will help us, we believe, provide a better product here in the next several months. All right, let's get to the Big Ten schedule, but first, your comments. The Rod Farva. So what do you think about the upcoming season? I think it's going to be somewhat of a down year. I believe you're talking about the Big Ten. I don't necessarily see a down year for the Big Ten. I'm not going to make my final determination on that until I see what happens at spring practice, until I evaluate the rosters. I think that there could be a perception that the Big Ten is down because Ohio State could possibly lose a game or two and miss the college football playoff, and therefore the Big Ten could be shut out of the playoffs. But that should not be much of a determination in evaluating a conference in this current format, in this current environment of 13 people going into a room and selecting 4 teams to play in an invitational. So if we're evaluating the entire conference, I don't see the Big Ten as being down this year. If we evaluate the very tip top of the conference, meaning is Ohio State going to be down this year? By Ohio State standards, possibly a smidge down with a new starting quarterback, although don't be surprised if, whether it's C.J. Stroud or someone else, is a very capable quarterback by week 5 or 6. Penn State's going to bounce back. I expect Michigan to bounce back to a certain extent. Let's understand that what the Big Ten did this season was just switch spots, just play a shell game. I don't know why there was an evaluation that the Big Ten was down. What did the Big Ten do in terms of results during the regular season? Well, the same thing that every conference does every year. They went 500. And that's all the games we had. We didn't have any out-of-conference games. Now, if Michigan would have gone out to Washington as scheduled originally and lost, and Ohio State would have went out to the West Coast and lost to the Ducks, and let's say Penn State would have lost to Virginia Tech, had the Big Ten played non-conference games against the likes of Oregon, Washington, Virginia Tech, Miami was supposed to be played by Michigan State, Iowa State, the annual rivalry game that the Hawkeyes play, and on and on and on and on, Wisconsin, Notre Dame. Had those games been played and the Big Ten didn't play well in those games, then I could understand the narrative this year that the Big Ten was down. But simply because Penn State and Michigan were down, that doesn't mean that the Big Ten was down. They just traded wins. The Big Ten just traded wins. The Big Ten record this season was exactly the same as the Big Ten record last season, as the Big Ten record in 2018, as 2018, as 2013, as 2004, as 1909. Same Big Ten record. So what are we basing these results on? We're basing them on conferences like the Big Ten and the SEC in particular that didn't play any non-conference games, couldn't boost their record by playing non-conference games. So a school like Indiana in the last few years that has gone, let's say, 4-5 or 5-4 in the Big Ten and then boosted its overall record by going 3-0 non-conference, couldn't do that. So the SEC typically has the best non-conference record in college football. And then it goes from there. The Big Ten typically wins 80 to 85% of its games non-conference. Therefore, that's going to raise the perception of the league. A lot of teams that are 4-5 are going to be 7-5 and possibly win a bowl game and be 8-5. Teams that were 2-7 or 5-7. Teams that are 5-4 in the conference turn into 8-4 teams when they've got those non-conference games to play, because the Big Ten is winning 85% of the non-conference games. Go year to year to year to year to year. And so teams that are only 5-4 in the Big Ten become 8-4 teams in their top 25 teams. But when they can only play conference games, the league's 500. So somebody's got to lose the games. So I kept hearing that the Big Ten was down this year. Penn State was down and Michigan were down. Okay. But again, the league still went 500. Every league went 500. And so then the only evaluation we had to make was during postseason play. Ohio State was 3 touchdowns better, at least on that particular night against Clemson, but they were 4 touchdowns worse than Alabama. So what did Ohio State turn out to be? Probably the second best team in the country. Probably. It's not bad for your league champion. Northwestern won a bowl game against Auburn, so they finished off a season in which they went 7-2. They only lost to Ohio State in a hard-fought game. So again, Northwestern never receiving credit as they should. If they put another name on the team and put on different uniforms, they would be evaluated differently. If Northwestern would do exactly what they did this past season, which was suffer a bad loss against Michigan State, sure, but a lot of quality wins against the likes of Iowa and Wisconsin, and then playing Ohio State extremely tough in the Big Ten championship game. If that was another team, if that was Penn State, or if that was an SEC team, we would say that team's like a 7th or 8th best team in the country, not Northwestern. So I don't see where the Big Ten was down this year. I'm going to say that it wasn't up, but I'm also going to say that my evaluation of it not being down and me not necessarily evaluating it as being up comes as a byproduct of them not playing enough games against out-of-conference competition. There was a bad loss by Indiana against Ole Miss in a bowl game. That was a bad loss by the Big Ten. And the Ohio State effort against Alabama isn't what it should be, but Alabama bludgeoned everyone. So they still were probably the second best team in college football. I'm not seeing the bad losses by the Big Ten other than that. Good win for Northwestern against Auburn in bowl play. Iowa didn't get to play in bowl play after ripping off 6 consecutive wins. I wanted to see the Hawkeyes play Missouri. And Wisconsin won a game by, 2 or 3 touchdowns in bowl play against Wake Forest. So that's 3-2 for the Big Ten in bowl play. That's all we've got to go on. That's it, 3-2. Lost to Alabama and lost to Ole Miss. Beat Clemson, that's pretty good. Beat Auburn. Beat Wake Forest. There it is. All right, let's get to it. Wanted to run down the schedule. Interesting week 0 game. So this week 0 is typically reserved for the Colorado States and Hawaiis of the world. But this particular season, we've got a Big Ten game in week 0, all by itself on the Big Ten schedule on August 28th. It's Nebraska at Illinois. Brett Bielema, welcome back to the Big Ten, taking on Scott Frost, who better start winning in his 4th season at Nebraska. All right, week 1 on a Thursday night. A bit reminiscent of Ohio State in 2017 going to Bloomington to start its Big Ten season, something that it had never done before in opening the season in Big Ten play, going to Minnesota to take on PJ Fleck and company, the Buckeyes and the Gophers on a Thursday night. Then that first Saturday, Penn State at Wisconsin. Wow, nice one. Purdue hosts Oregon State. Purdue is playing a very difficult non-conference schedule. Not that Oregon State's a great team, but they're just a run-of-the-mill team on Purdue's non-conference schedule. Purdue really bulked up the non-conference schedule this year. Temple at Rutgers, difficult game for the Scarlet Knights in terms of a group of 5. The game of the week in the Big Ten. This is going to be interesting. Indiana goes to Iowa. Indiana coming off a very impressive season, although the letdown in the bowl game against Ole Miss didn't finish well for the Hoosiers, and Tom Allen have to open at Iowa. So again, many more conference games opening the season than we're accustomed to. Usually the Big Ten would start, they'd rip off the 3 non-conference games, then they dive into play. Over the last 5 years, we've seen much more conference play in weeks 1 and 2. West Virginia at Maryland. There's a traditional rivalry game renewed in College Park, with Mike Loxley coming off a strong recruiting effort in 2021, taking on West Virginia. Western Michigan at Michigan. Michigan State at Northwestern. Another Big Ten tilt in week 1. Illinois, after the game against Nebraska, will take on Texas San Antonio at home. So Nebraska plays the week 0 game, then gets a bye. Don't necessarily know if that's a smart scheduling position for the Big Ten. Nebraska plays 1 game, then they get a bye. Okay, and again, stay tuned to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, this next week, and we're going to fix scheduling. Non-conference and conference. All right. Week 2 in the Big Ten. Rutgers at Syracuse. I would like to see more games from the underlings in the Big Ten, Maryland, Rutgers, those two teams in particular, reuniting with some of their Eastern Bloc powers, or would be or used to be powers a long, long time ago. Rutgers, Syracuse. That's a good matchup. You've got two New York schools. Rutgers, Maryland playing again, West Virginia, playing Boston College, playing Syracuse. Maryland maintaining some of those ACC ties. Rutgers maintaining some of those Big East ties, and they do it right here against Syracuse on the road. Illinois and Virginia, interesting game for Brett Bielema's club, taking on the Cavaliers on the road. We'll see if that highly rated Virginia quarterback who was signed will win the starting job. Idaho at Indiana, Iowa State, tremendous matchup. Washington at Michigan, game was supposed to be played in Seattle in 2020. We'll see what happens to that matchup on the road for the Wolverines, but they play at the Big House September 11th. Youngstown State at Michigan State, Miami of Ohio at Minnesota, Buffalo at Nebraska. Now, Nebraska better look out. Jared Patterson moves on to the NFL, but Buffalo's been a good team for the past few years, and Nebraska playing Buffalo at home. That is not a gimme. We've got Indiana State taking on Northwestern. Oregon, Ohio State, most likely to be a primetime affair on September 11th. Ball State at Penn State, Purdue at UConn, Eastern Michigan at Wisconsin. Again, upset alert, look out, Nebraska. Let's go to week 3. And I wish this would turn over better for me, because every time I go to the next week, I then have to click off of the national schedules and go to the Big Ten schedule. Love this matchup. Here we go. September 18th. Auburn at Penn State. Brian Harsin, first season at Auburn. Of course, this will be his third game going to Happy Valley to take on James Franklin. And the Nittany Lions looking to amend their 4-5 record from this past year. Northwestern and Duke. These two schools have hooked up considerably in the last 10 seasons. A number of matchups back and forth between Northwestern and Duke as being the brains of the ACC and the Big Ten. Miami should be 2 touchdowns better than Michigan State, especially at Hard Rock Stadium, but Michigan State will hit them. This is a challenge for Miami in the way that they've let down against slightly lesser teams. I don't want to pretend that there's some enormous gap like this is one of the elites of college football taking on Kansas. It's not that, but it's a top 15 roster taking on a top 45 roster. And so Miami should beat Michigan State, but Michigan State under Mel Tucker, Purdue at Notre Dame. Love this matchup. Love it, love it, love it. For you young college football fans, you don't remember when Purdue and Notre Dame was an annual rivalry game. Would love to see that renewed and played every year. Purdue at Notre Dame. Maryland at Illinois, Cincinnati at Indiana. We talked in our previous show, Notre Dame Live, about Cincinnati's situation this year and going to Bloomington to take on Indiana. And the Bearcats also take on Notre Dame. Cincinnati with 2 huge opportunities here this upcoming season. Of course, need to go out and win the games and then root for Notre Dame and Indiana to have exceptional seasons, and then what to do with Cincinnati. But in focusing on the Big Ten, this is going to be one of the more difficult non-conference games that Indiana's faced in recent years. Indiana, Cincinnati, the Hoosiers play typically a cupcake non-conference schedule. When have they ever played anyone? I'll let you know. 2 marginal Virginia teams recently. Other than that, Indiana doesn't play anybody outside the conference. Finally, they play Cincinnati. Kent State at Iowa. Northern Illinois at Michigan, Minnesota at Colorado. That's an interesting non-conference game. The Buffs showed some life last season under Carl Doral in his first season in Boulder. Minnesota at Colorado. Nebraska at Oklahoma. Oklahoma. If we give it a little Keith Jackson. To turn on the TV on September 18th and see Nebraska and Oklahoma jerseys on the same field is going to do something good to my heart. Now, the game may not turn out to be a decent game because Oklahoma's miles better than Nebraska right now, but just to see those two uniforms on the same field is going to do me some good. Although it's not going to be on that worn and tattered and faded artificial turf that we used to see at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln and also in Norman, where they both had the artificial turf until, what, the mid-90s? Well, Nebraska still has the turf. They just switched out the indoor-outdoor carpeting that would sit on the concrete for actual synthetic surface that works with some cushion. But at Oklahoma, of course, they're on the natural grass. All right, Tulsa at Ohio State. The Buckeyes facing a top-level group of 5. And so the Buckeyes non-conference schedule is no joke with Oregon and Tulsa. And then Rutgers takes on Delaware and Piscataway. On to week 3. Make that week 4, and then I'll check out your comments. And, of course, I'm taking live calls as well. And by the way, that would be the only way I would take calls would be live. So I am taking calls 860-325-3687. Big Ten week 4, Indiana at Western Kentucky, Notre Dame at Wisconsin. Love that game. Outside of Clemson, Georgia, this might be my favorite non-conference game of the season. Notre Dame, Wisconsin. They were supposed to play, I believe, at Lambeau Field last year. They're going to play at Soldier Field this year. I think that's the quote-unquote home-and-home type series in these NFL stadiums between Wisconsin and Notre Dame. Illinois at Purdue. Colorado State at Iowa. Kent State at Maryland as the Golden Flashes take on both Iowa and Maryland. Rutgers at Michigan. That matchup of the triple overtime in Piscataway, this time at the Big House, as the Scarlet Knights look for a little revenge against the Wolverines. Nebraska at Michigan State. We got Bowling Green at Minnesota, Ohio at Northwestern. Look out for the Wildcats there. Look out for the Bobcats for the Wildcats because Northwestern has, despite the tremendous accomplishments of Pat Fitzgerald, has a history of losing to MAC teams. And then we've got Akron at Ohio State and Villanova at Penn State. All right, on to week 5. As we make our way into October. And we've got in the Big Ten starting on October 2nd, all the games on Saturday that weekend. Charlotte at Illinois, Western Kentucky at Michigan State, Indiana at Maryland. Iowa, Northwestern, big game in the Big Ten Western Division. Michigan at Wisconsin. The Badgers bludgeoned Michigan, embarrassed them at the Big House last year, and embarrassed them the year before at Camp Randall. 2 consecutive just butt kickings by the Badgers over the Wolverines. Minnesota at Purdue. They played a tight game down to the wire. Minnesota got a gift of a call late and scored the game-winning touchdown against Purdue. Actually, Purdue had scored the game-winning touchdown that was called back on a phantom pass interference play. Ohio State at Nebraska as the Huskers, again, draw the short straw in having to take on Ohio State. They were killed in 19 and 20. Nebraska gave them a game in Columbus, 36-31 in 2018. Here we go to week 6. Then I'll check out your comments on the live chat. Short schedule this particular week. I believe there are 2 teams off. Indiana at Michigan. The Hoosiers beat Michigan for the first time this past season, going back to 1987. Penn State at Iowa. They have played some great games in recent years, both at Kinnick and in Happy Valley. Maryland at Rutgers. Wisconsin at Minnesota for the Paul Bunyan Axe. Northwestern at Nebraska. Big game for the Huskers there. Purdue at Ohio State. Of course, the Boilers took the Buckeyes to the woodshed in West Lafayette in 2018. That Ohio State team that won the Rose Bowl, won the Big Ten, went 13-1, number 3 in the country, but were completely annihilated by Rondell Moore and the Boilers, 49-20. So the return visit to Columbus 3 seasons later. Week 7 in the Big Ten. Oh, was going to check the chat. Let's do that. And keep in mind that these live streams, whether they be call-in shows or team-specific live streams, are only possible based on your individual contributions, which you can give here in the Super Chat, or Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Also, that we would like to keep these team-specific live streams going that currently feature Miami, Florida State, and Ohio State. But if you would like another team featured, let me know. Let me know. If you would like to feature another team, see another team featured on team-specific live streams each week. All right. Got Peanut Butter Hero. Which Big Ten team will make it to the Outback Bowl this year? I will make that prediction the last week of August. So it's going to be about the 4th or 5th best team in the Big Ten, because you've got a team that's likely going to make the playoff, most likely, and then another team or 2 that are going to make the New Year's Six. Then you've got your Citrus Bowl participant. Then you've got your 5th seed, typically in that range, going to the Outback Bowl. So it's got a Iowa, Indiana feel to it, maybe Northwestern. But who knows at this point? Oh boy, I lost my place in the chat, because this happens to me all the time. And we'll let everyone know that the phone lines are open, 860-325-3687. Nothing big about the Big Ten. A little back and forth between Reasonable Gump and the Rod Farva concerning the locations of SEC non-conference games, I guess. All right. Not too much there in the live chat, so we'll keep moving on with the conference schedule. Keep in mind, you can give me a call at 860-325-3687 as we march through the Big Ten schedule, and maybe I'll post a video on this, although I have so many ideas for videos, my head's exploding right now. Week 7. Week 7 will take place on October 16th. All the Big Ten games will be played on Saturday. Illinois at Penn State, Rutgers at Indiana, Michigan, Michigan State, one of the great rivalries in college football, Nebraska, Purdue, Army at Wisconsin. Love the military academies, and I love the schools that play the military academies. Army at Wisconsin will probably give the Badgers fits for a half or so. Let's move on to week 8. And we've got Wisconsin at Illinois. Brad Bielema facing his old team. Iowa at Maryland. Penn State at Michigan State. Minnesota at Northwestern. Key game in the Big Ten Western Division. Ohio State taking on Rutgers in Piscataway. All right, let's go to the end of November or end of October. October 30th is week 9. Rutgers at Illinois. Indiana, Penn State, one of the most exciting finishes and strangest, peculiar games of 2020, with Michael Penix stretching out toward the pylon, whether he scored or not. He technically scored, and Indiana upset Penn State 36-35 in overtime. They go back to Happy Valley this year, do the Hoosiers. Purdue at Iowa. Maryland, Minnesota, of course, they played one of the most exciting games of 2020. Minnesota raced out to an 18-point lead. Maryland came back, won the game, I believe, something in the range of 45-44. Yeah, there was a missed PAT in overtime. Yes. Michigan at Nebraska. Michigan State, Ohio State, and Columbus, and Northwestern at Wisconsin. Huge game, big game, maybe the biggest game of the year in the Big Ten Western Division. On to week 10. Week 10, all the games played on Saturday as well. You've got Illinois at Minnesota, Ohio State at Indiana. Of course, the Hoosiers tested the Buckeyes this past season, and they've got the Buckeyes in Bloomington this year. So a lot of people are going to look at that game and think, that's the upset that we're trying to find for Ohio State, after the Buckeyes have now won how many consecutive Big Ten games? In 2019, Ohio State lost to nobody. 2020, they lost to nobody. 2018, they lost the game to Purdue somewhat late in the season. So the Buckeyes won, of course, all 10 Big Ten games, including the championship game in 19. They won 6 this past year, so that's 16 straight. They've got about 18 or 19 consecutive conference wins. Penn State at Maryland. The Terps have been bludgeoned and destroyed and annihilated and embarrassed by Penn State in recent years, but they got back at the Nittany Lions in Happy Valley this past year. Northwestern at Michigan. Michigan State at Purdue. Wisconsin at Rutgers. That is the first weekend of November. I really anticipated calls about the Big Ten schedule. Saturday, November 13th, Michigan State at Indiana. Minnesota at Iowa. Love that game. Love it. Maryland at Ohio State. Wish I would have seen those two teams play this year. Michigan at Penn State. Used to be a big matchup in the Big Ten. We'll see this year. Would not have been this past year and wasn't when they played, and Penn State was 0-5. Southeast Louisiana at Nebraska. Rutgers at Northwestern, and Purdue at Wisconsin. All right. Let's go to the second to last weekend of the season in the Big Ten. Iowa hosts Illinois. We've got Minnesota at Indiana. Interesting matchup there. Michigan and Maryland. Michigan State at Rutgers. Wisconsin at Nebraska. Let's see what the Huskers finally have here. Purdue at Northwestern, and Penn State, Ohio State. The often anticipated best matchup in the Big Ten wasn't to be here in 2020, but has been since 2016. 2016, 17, 18, and 19 basically decided the Big Ten championship. And then finally, rivalry weekend, week 13 in the Big Ten, will be all the matchups that we anticipate them to be. Starting with a Friday game, another Friday game here in Nebraska at Minnesota. And then on Saturday, November 27th, Rutgers at Penn State, Northwestern at Illinois, Indiana, Purdue for the old Oaken Bucket, Iowa at Wisconsin, Maryland, Michigan State, and the game played in the Big House. So that means the Big Ten championship game will be played whatever that date is in December, the first Saturday of December. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, had scheduled Notre Dame Live at 2 o'clock. We talked Fighting Irish until 3. I saw that the Big Ten schedule was being re-released, so I struck up this live stream for a 3 o'clock Eastern time window. Later today on Patreon, an exclusive live stream with you. Grab the link in the description section of any of the videos to join us on Patreon at 6 o'clock Eastern time. And then at 8 o'clock, another call-in show with you. And I'll dig up a nice little topic for us to headline at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Peanut Butter Hero likes East Carolina. Certainly a fit for the Big 12. Real talk. Exactly. You need non-conference games to know which conference is up and which conferences are down. That's the only way we can compare the conferences. Double X buckets for life. Double X, is Northwestern really going to be good this season? Well, they typically are. Northwestern has the type program under Pat Fitzgerald in which they're good 4 out of typically 5 seasons. This cycle is repeating itself. So when you say good, I think you mean Northwestern good. When I think Northwestern good, that's 8-4, 9-3. Going to a decent bowl game. Winning the Big Ten Western Division 2 of the last 3 years. But the cycle down was the sandwich season of 2019 in which they went 3-9. So they'll cycle down because they just don't reload. They do have that season every so often, about every 4 to 5 years, in which they have a weak senior class, both in numbers and in quality. They hit a tougher schedule, and they have a few injuries go against them, and they cycle down to 3 to 4 to 5 wins. But other than that, yes, I've got every expectation that Northwestern is going to be good this year. Again, real talk, I don't think it's an every other season pattern for Northwestern. Actually, let me correct myself. I don't think anything. I know it's not an every other season for Northwestern. Go back to 2012. We're talking 9 seasons ago. Look at Northwestern. They've had 2 down seasons in the last 9, meaning 5-7, 3-9. Razorbacks rule. Hey, Mark, I think this is the end of Ohio State. Yeah, I think that's forthcoming. I think that's pretty obvious for all of us to see. Probably doesn't even need to be stated that we all see it coming. Nobody's really talking about it because everybody just kind of knows it. Razorbacks Rule says Ohio State loses to Indiana and Oregon. Well, they must be losing to everybody else as well if this is going to be the end of them. Razorbacks Rule, Arkansas actually did play Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl. Yes, we remember it well. In January of 2011, Buckeyes ran out to a big lead, almost blew it, won 31-28. Correct? 31-26, 31-28. I think it was 31-26. Double X buckets for life. Double X likes Michigan State to be in the top 3 in the Eastern Division. Okay. We've got a polite debate going between the Rod Farva and Reasonable Gump. That's entertaining. Peanut Butter Hero, Notre Dame hasn't won a major bowl since 1991. Well, to be technically correct, it was 1993. And then to be even further correct, it was January of 94. But the 93 season, and their fans believe they're a top 5 program. Actually, Razorbacks Rule, I think that Notre Dame's win over Clemson in South Bend in December had more to do with 3 defensive starters, Mike Jones, Wyatt Davis, and James Skalski missing that game than it did with Trevor Lawrence, with DJ Uiagalelei throwing for 439 yards, no interceptions, and basically Clemson's effort on offense, if you compare the ACC championship game with what they produced in South Bend, was equal. They actually scored more points in South Bend, but it was the defensive just discrepancy in production in those 2 games that was the difference. The Rod Farva letting me know that he and Reasonable Gump are now friends. Was awfully concerned. Got Ricardo on the line. My question, do you think Packers trade to Aaron Rodgers to the 49ers, yes or no? One you say about this, Mark Rogers? I first want to read this question verbatim. My question, do you think Packers trade to Aaron Rodgers to 49ers? Yes or no, can you say about this, Mark Rogers? I can say that the call will start at the beep. Yeah, if the Packers want to play Jordan Love at quarterback and give up arguably the best quarterback in the history of the game, I'm not talking about the most accomplished, the best quarterback of all time, arguably, to build for the future, while the 49ers want to win now because their roster seems to be prepared to win now, then make the trade. Hello, who's on the line?
reasonable compare.
There he is, fighting about neutral site games.
Yeah, me and Red Bar we're kind of laughing at you.
Laughing at me?
Reading our comments like 10 minutes after the fact.
Well, that's the best I can do. What can I say? Give me a producer and a staff, and we'll do much better.
Well, I'm glad you got some entertainment out of it.
Sure, that was the best entertainment in the chat.
So got a quick topic here. I want to brush with you. I know you want people to call about it to get Big Ten schedule, but
nobody is.
I mean, is it really that? Is there anything to talk about? Like interesting with it? I mean,
well,
it's just a normal schedule, right?
I'm going to have a lot to talk about this coming week because basically I'm going to reconstruct all the schedules and I'm going to lay that out for everybody. So I'm going to have fun doing that, and we'll see what kind of response I get to that. But yeah, there's really nothing that we didn't already know about the Big Ten schedule. It was just formally released in terms of the dates. Yes. Yep. It's a full schedule. Yep.
At least for now.
Yeah. And we've got let's see how many games against the SEC. I guess it would just be the one, Penn State Auburn. It should be a nice little matchup.
You know, normally I congratulate Penn State on their early win, but I can't even congratulate Penn State on a win against Mercer after that season I just saw.
Exactly.
So we'll see. And again, Auburn's not exactly trending upwards either. So that should be interesting, but for all the wrong reasons, don't you think?
Well, to me,
you want an interesting game with two big teams who are both on the rise, like Ohio State and Oregon.
Yeah.
This is for the exact opposite reason.
When I say it's interesting, I don't mean that I expect either one of those teams to do anything special this year or seriously compete for a championship. I just think that for the Big Ten and the SEC to be on the same field during the regular season is rare, number one, so it's interesting to me. Number two, as you mentioned, they are brand names, so I'll watch Auburn and Penn State play any season.
They're both I would probably put them both at the exact same spot here relative to their conference. They've each won 2 natties. They're both that kind of team that can kind of randomly get hot once in a decade. Or and during some of the other years, they look like they're going to do something cool, but then they always mess it up.
Well, Auburn's really been the aberration with the national championship in 2010, the run back to the national championship game in 13, the 2-10 in between those, and then all these 4 and 5 lost seasons under Gus Malzahn. Under James Franklin, Penn State's been a pretty consistent 10-2 type team up until this past season.
But the general feel that like you mentioned, Auburn made it to the national title in 13. They made it to the SEC championship in 17.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think. But then, look at Penn State. They won the Big Ten under James Franklin, and there were a couple of years there where, Ohio State was the only one kind of in their path, and they could have made it back there. So it's kind of just it's not the same, but it's a similar kind of feel. They're both a team that, they can kind of sneak up on you, and they look like they can potentially close this out, but then they mess it up somehow. But yeah, it's interesting just for the wrong reasons. So, topic I want to brush with you. Historically, college football seems to be kind of cyclical with who's on top. Like I say in Game of Thrones, it's like a wheel that keeps spinning. Someone's on top, and then someone's on the bottom being crushed. We had a little brief history out there with where the Pac-12 was looking like they were the best conference, specifically for because of USC, and then it rotated around to the SEC for a really long time, and then it looked like it was going to rotate to Clemson, and now it's kind of back in the SEC. Do you think that wheel is going to keep turning? Like, do you think the SEC is at any time soon in danger of falling down like the Pac-12 or the Big 12 have done?
No.
Because it looks to me that the landscape of college football now, not all, but in the colloquial use of the word all of the big talent seems to be coming from around the South. Not necessarily SEC states, but I mean, I guess Texas is technically an SEC state now. So from Texas all the way to Florida, those are just where everyone is looking for all the really big names. I'm not trying to throw any disrespect to Ohio or California, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah. When you say all, of course it's not all.
Schools.
Yes. It's not literally all, but it might as well be. Right. It's, 88% or 92% or whatever. Right. So to answer your question with one word, no. I also was surprised to see you even frame it as being cyclical. I think that the Pac-12 at one point was an extremely good conference up until about 5 or 6 years ago. From basically the time that I started watching college football in the late 70s, the Pac-12 was not laughed at, was never a joke, was a legitimate conference, and sometimes could be argued, there was never a time where the Pac-12 was where the SEC is now, where, the Pac-12 is the best conference, and nobody argued about it. But during many stretches during that time, it could be argued that the Pac-12 was the best conference. Like, it wasn't a joke of an argument.
Right.
They a legitimate claim. It wasn't a slam dunk like it's been with the SEC for the past 10 or 15 years. No, I don't see the SEC for a number of reasons. You pointed out the most obvious and the most important one is that that's where the talent is, but also that's where the commitment is. That's where the commitment is because of the interest, because of the engagement, because of the culture. They're not going to let it slip. If you picked up all the Pac-12 schools and moved them to SEC territory, well, they'd suddenly have all the players in the backyard, but if they didn't change their mindset and their commitment to football, they wouldn't take the advantage of the players in the backyard as well as Alabama, Florida, LSU, and the rest of them do, because they care. And I'm not saying, when I say care, again, it's almost like you saying all. Are there?
It's exactly the same way.
Are there?
There's people
yes.
in the West Coast who care about it.
That love it. There's just not enough of them.
Just trying to nitpick and trying to be ultra politically correct about it. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
People listening now know what you mean when you say that.
I hope so. There's not enough of them. There's not enough of them. Maybe per capita, I'm just throwing out numbers. If you could rate levels of football fandom, if you grabbed 100 people randomly in the South that represented the landscape of the South, maybe 40 of them are just off the rails football fans, just crazy. And then another 45 are still love watching football and watch games every week or whatever. And then there's only 10 or 15 that are like, we know what's going on because it's all around us, but whatever. Where maybe in Pac-12 country, it's only like 5 or 10 people out of 100 are crazy fanatics and so forth and so on.
And then this kind of slides me right into this next one, and then that's all I got for today. So, is that good for college football? And I'm going to split this into two parts. Is the SEC consistently being the dominating conference good for college football as a whole? And then take out your microscope and go in further. Is Alabama doing what they're doing now good for college football?
I think to answer the first part of your question, it would be a no. It's not good for one conference to be that much better than the rest of them. So the SEC is definitely the best. It's definitely been the best for roughly at least 15 years, something in that range, about 15 years. Not that it wasn't before that, but it wasn't so clear as it has been over the last 15 years. I don't know that the conference has been the best every single year, but if we would go through every single year, I also wouldn't be surprised if I came to the conclusion, yeah, it was the best every single year. So it might as well be.
Might as well.
because of the diversity, and that might be a bad term to use because the SEC seems to be one culture, but you are stretching geographically from South Carolina up to Kentucky, over to Missouri, down to Texas, and then all the way down to the tip of Florida. So there is a large landmass there. So I don't think my answer to the first question being no is as strong of a statement or as adamant as my answer to the second part of the question, which is Alabama's dominance bad for the sport? I would give that a resounding yes, that it's bad for the sport. So I think both are bad for the sport, but I think more so Alabama because it isolates even more teams and fans and programs. Maybe if Ohio State and Clemson fell off the cliff, then the SEC dominance would really be horrible for the sport. You know, if Ohio State became Penn State next year and then just kind of morphed into the rest of the Big Ten, where it became this nice, like Pac-12 kind of conference where the best teams are 9-3 and they go to decent bowl games, and there's got to be a conference champion, but nobody really takes them too seriously. And Clemson becomes Clemson of pre-2013 or 14, and the ACC really doesn't have anything to offer. And suddenly, wow, you know, that's the first time I've really thought about it that way, where maybe only two programs in the nation are holding up the dam for it just to be complete and utter domination.
I can't argue with anything you said. I was thinking about it earlier, and being completely objective about it, Alabama dominating college football like this is not good for college football. I mean, all you have to do is look at the ratings of the national championship game. That was Alabama, Ohio State, with Justin Fields on there. Ohio State just crushed, steamrolled Clemson. They were on a major high. I mean, everyone in your comments, so you were basically an Ohio State channel for that 11 days. Everyone, your comments were predicting Ohio State to win, despite seeing what Alabama had done all year long. And then it had, I don't know if it was the worst national title game ratings of all time. It may have been not quite as low as the Alabama-Georgia one, the two SEC teams, but it was low. And that blew my mind. Like, this is Alabama-Ohio State.
Yeah.
And coming into this, it looked like Ohio State was going to do it, or it looked like they had a very good chance to do it. So that blew my mind. But I mean, that's just right there. Even in just an isolated incident, that should all you need to kind of answer that question. As an Alabama fan, I can't feel too bad about it. For the obvious reason, but for the second one is Nick Saban's is not going to be here. It's not, it's not like he's immortal. It's not going to be here forever. Eventually, it'll stop, and eventually, presumably it'll get to be more of an even field, and then the sport will pick back up. So it's not like this is a terminal thing. At least I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I don't think it will be.
Well, I tend to agree with you, although the Jim Tressel to Urban Meyer to Ryan Day passing of the baton hasn't seemed to really upset Ohio State's role.
I think a lot of that, though, is due to the fact that Ohio, I mean, I don't feel bad saying this because you've pretty much said the same thing yourself. Like, you have Ohio State, then you have to jump off a cliff to find the rest of the Big Ten. So I think that's part of that. I mean, they are the shining light of the Big Ten right now.
Yeah.
So I think that is. Sure. I mean, Alabama. You look over here at Georgia, which they theoretically should be competition for them. LSU beat them last year, won the whole thing. Yeah. You never know what Auburn's going to do, and so I think that has something to do with it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I wonder though, this is the only example I really want to bring up, but were people saying the same thing about the NBA when Michael Jordan and the Bulls were winning their 6 championships in kind of a short amount of time? Like, was that bad for the NBA? Is Alabama winning their 6th here has been bad for the sport?
Well, I'm not a huge NBA guy, but I watched a lot of it at that point, and the Bulls actually struggled to win most of those series. Like they were pushed. Maybe not to the brink. It wasn't like a last-second shot in Game 7 every time, but those were competitive series that they played to win NBA championships and even to win Eastern Conference championships. Whereas, we just saw Alabama and Ohio State. I can make all sorts of excuses for Ohio State, and I think some of them are valid, but still, the final score tells us what the final score is. And this is when I would love if college football was a series and would love to see what would it really be. Can God tell us if they played 10 times what it would look like? But I don't think there's any question that Alabama was a superior team. Now, I don't think the score would have been the same had they been able to play so many times. But Ohio State was just so awful in one unit on the field that they got buried. But they shouldn't get buried based on recruiting rankings and based on the player ratings coming out of high school.
Right.
Alabama's superior, but it's close.
As you know, Mark, everyone keeps, everyone's saying it's a fact. This is the end times for Ohio State now. You've seen the writing in the sky and all that.
Well, I think
despite having one of their best recruiting classes ever.
Well, I think we talked about it after the game. I think that wasn't just a talent gap. I think Nick Saban took Ryan Day to school. And I say that with all respect to Ryan Day. I think he's one of the best and brightest coaches in college football. I just think that he needed to experience that full experience of taking the team through the playoff to the championship game, and they got out-coached as a staff.
Yeah. I kind of held back from going after anyone who keeps trying to pull the injury excuse with Ohio State because they conveniently forget that Alabama was equally injured.
Exactly.
Everyone thought Jalen Waddle was supposed to be the best receiver in the country, but now people want to say what's insignificant that he was out of the game or that he was on playing on one foot.
Yeah.
By the way, Mechie's ankle was broken. Mac Jones was throwing to our 4th and 5th receiver. Slate Bolden had his first touchdown of the entire season in that game. So Landon Dickerson, our center, was out. Forrest Saul was. I don't think he played. He was our best tight end. So Alabama had injury problems too.
Yeah. Well, that's also the nature of being a fan. Is number one, they're only going to look at their team because of emotions, but also just because of sheer knowledge. That the typical Ohio State team is focused on their team and maybe a few teams around them, and they know the stars that play for Alabama, and they don't know what Alabama's persevered through the season and who's been injured. They just know, woe is us because we lost our best running back and this person and that person and that person. So we could have played better.
Well, anyway, that's what I got for you. So, to go back on one more comment, you said you're surprised I used the word typical. I guess I kind of think of it like that was because, especially if you stand back across college football, the history of it, the Big Ten was on top for a lot of it, with the exception of Alabama in the kind of the early 20s and 30s, and then later on in the 60s. College football was mostly, and then some, a couple of years in Tennessee in there. College football, the Big Ten was the one on top, and so I do think if you span it out over a very long time, it definitely has been cyclical. when you start thinking about it like that, I mean, the Big Ten still to this day has more schools and racks up more national titles than the SEC does, despite everything they've done in the last 20 years. Now, I think that'll change in another 20 years, but so that's what I meant is I just wonder if we're thinking long term, how long is it going to be before this starts to even out or even swings to another part of the country, if it ever will.
Yeah, I remember reading a Sports Illustrated that was sizing up a national championship race. Oh my goodness, it was some time between, let's say, 1979 and like 83, and they were pointing out somebody's schedule. I think it was Alabama's schedule, like in 1980, 81, somewhere in that range, and basically, talking about the Mississippi States of the world, but even the schools that now are football powers as being doormats, and that their schedule wasn't that good.
LSU.
Yeah, they're the one in particular. Yeah, right when I became a college football fan, nobody really talked about Auburn for the first couple of years, and then Bo showed up, and Auburn was good, and it was like, oh wow, Auburn's good now.
And then Bo left, and Auburn went back to who they are. But no, it's actually what you just said is a perfect example of why a lot of old school Alabama fans like to still say that Tennessee is the biggest rival, which to me is just ridiculous right now. Almost with the last 14 years.
Yeah, that's a long time.
That's why they'll tell you that. Is because Tennessee historically, before the their last title, I think it was in 2001 or 2, one of those. Before that, they were the second place SEC team, believe it or not. They won a lot of, it was them in Florida for the most part of the mid 90s.
Sure.
Winning the East and winning the whole conference. They were a good program. But the problem is, no football player who is playing right now was alive when that was happening.
Yeah, when CBS used to schedule its one huge primetime game every year, there in the early to mid 90s into the late 90s, they would almost every year schedule Tennessee and Florida as their primetime game.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see if someone else can get on.
All right.
Good conversation with you, Mark, as always. And
absolutely.
I'll be sure to bring up a good topic next time.
Appreciate that. Have a good one. Right, folks. Appreciate everyone jumping on the line. I realized that I did not post the call-in number, so I apologize for that. We'll be on for a little while longer. I've got a Nebraska report here coming up at 5:30 Eastern, Patreon exclusive live stream at 6 Eastern. That's another way in which we provide just more content and more benefits to you. We've got an interesting Super Bowl prop bet guarantee of sorts and some historical reasons why. They're over on Patreon for about 16 to 17 cents per day. So we would invite you to join us there. And again, exclusive live stream there on Patreon at 6 o'clock Eastern time. I'll be back here tonight at 8. Going to have to come up with an interesting, riveting topic rather than just taking phone calls. Well, we'll come up with something between now and 8. And I've got a special guest as well at 8 o'clock Eastern time. All right, let's give the live chat one more look. There you go. Mark East, that was right at the beginning of my career as a sports fan, watching the NBA Finals after the late local news on tape delay. All right. So coming up this week, I am going to start a series on my scheduling fix for college football. Hopefully you guys will enjoy that, and it will provide much to discuss. My scheduling fix for college football in-conference and out-of-conference scheduling formulas that may not be perfect, but if your target, if your goal, if your aim, your mission is equality in scheduling, fair, balanced scheduling, then it's impossible to make it completely fair, because you can only make it fair in theory or in practice or in structure, because once the teams start playing, then we truly find out how good they are. We can only attempt to make it fair and can actually make it fair based on previous results. But as we find out from year to year, 3-9 teams become 7-5 teams, and 8-4 teams become 4-8 teams. So we can only base it on the previous years, but that is going to lift us from a completely imbalanced schedule in conference to a, at least on paper, a schedule that is fair, balanced, and equal. In conference and out of conference scheduling we'll address coming up starting on Monday or Tuesday. We'll start to get those videos released. I'm going to look at every schedule, every conference, and give you the formula that I propose in every conference, both in conference and out of conference scheduling. And then, see, that sets us up for the playoff formula that we'll release as well. So we've got to fix the scheduling, because then once we fix the scheduling, then we can better evaluate the teams to select to make it to the playoffs. And we want to do less selection, less selections, less selecting. I mixed those two words together there. We want to do less selecting, and we want to do more earning of playoff spots. Right now, we're in the world of selecting. The NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NBA and the NHL are in the world of earning. We're going to get away from the college football invitational, and we're going to make it a playoff. And what I'm really wrestling with, I got to admit, is the inclusion or exclusion of the group of five, because I see merits to both. And I've got to make a decision, because I don't want to roll out like 3 playoff formats and say, take your pick. I want to say, this is the one, here it is. But I'm having trouble with a group of 5, because I see Georgia play Cincinnati, and I see the group of 5 split, let's say, actually win 5 of 9 New Year's 6 appearances against top 10 teams in the nation. And I want to give the group of 5 a chance. And I would love to see the day when, after getting blown out 50-7, 18 consecutive years, that one group of 5 team is going to win a national championship. Boise State in the year 2047 is going to win the national championship. Or it's going to take 12 years from now in 2033, in which Tulsa is going to win a first-round playoff game against Penn State. Whenever, or maybe next year when it happens, because Cincinnati and Georgia have a rematch in the first round of the playoff, and Cincinnati beats them this time. I would love to see an opportunity for those schools, because they're playing at a high level. But realistically, I think the best way to do it for competition's sake is to exclude the group of 5, and I'll build them a playoff format as well. And we'll have all sorts of good group of 5 matchups for the playoff. And then we'll just take the top 8 from the Power 5. And maybe we'll force Notre Dame into a conference. See, that's what's screwing this whole thing. That is what's screwing this whole thing up, because what I did was I've already laid out the groundwork, my rules and my stipulations for conference scheduling in each conference. And this is not a new thing. I did this years ago, and I'm just revising it, tweaking it, adjusting it, making sure I'm not missing anything. But Notre Dame's the one that screws this up. They screw this up, because if you want an equitable schedule out of conference, then you include Notre Dame in, and I won't go through the logistics of the whole thing, but basically they screw up the whole formula. They do. Notre Dame does. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Mark Rogers, the man that gets college football its voice. Hi, how are you, sir?
Hey, David. I'm doing well. How's it going?
Good, good. I just wanted to say, if there is a case for a year
Heck yeah.
with their schedule?
Oh, you're talking about coming up in 2021, their schedule.
Correct.
Absolutely. I want to see more than anything else, David, before I lose my voice here, let me take some water. I want to see Cincinnati beat Indiana and Notre Dame, run the table in the American Conference, and sit there with a resume that's probably going to be comparable to maybe a Clemson winning the ACC.
Well, that's what I was going to go with. Let's say if they beat, because Indiana could be a top 10 to 15 team this year. Notre Dame can be a top 10 to 15 team. And then if they beat a top 20 team in their conference, that's looking pretty good, Mark Rogers.
Yep. And so we need Cincinnati not only to run the table, we need just what you just stated, Indiana and Notre Dame to turn into good teams that go, we can't expect them just to go flawless otherwise. That would be the perfect storm would be, can you imagine Indiana goes out and wins the Big Ten with one loss to Cincinnati, and they're 13-1 or 12-1, I guess, after the Big Ten championship game, and Notre Dame's 11-1. Now that's the perfect storm. That's a bit unreasonable, but something close to that. Let's say each team only loses another game, and Indiana's a 10-2 team, and Notre Dame's a 10-2 team, and Cincinnati not only beats them, but they beat them on the road.
Right. Well, if Mark, people are, already saying that Indiana could be the second best team in the Big Ten this year. Early prognostications. I mean, we're going to have to see how good Michigan and Penn State are this year. I mean, they could be a lot better this year. Maybe they will be, but a lot of people think Indiana could be the second best team coming into this year. So there's a good chance that they could be a top 15 team.
You're right. It brings me back to the recruiting rankings. How in the world did they form the second best team in the Big Ten potentially with the roster that they put together? It just doesn't add up.
I would agree with you. Although, some teams certainly overachieve the recruiting rankings. I mean, obviously,
oh, sure.
We're talking about a team.
Wisconsin, perfect example. Yeah.
Right. And then we talked about how much, Texas for years has underachieved the recruiting rankings. So.
But Wisconsin being my example, Wisconsin is taking top. Now, this year, they turned in a top 15 class that is completely off the chain for them, as you know. But they have won Big Ten championships and competed for conference titles with rosters that were full of, like, the 28th class, the 32nd class. In that 25 to 35 range has typically been where Wisconsin's been. Indiana's classes are in the 60s. Still, this one was like 54.
Right. Well, and maybe, we're talking about the non-power five not being able to compete with the big boys. And maybe this was an outlier year, and maybe, Georgia kind of played down to them a little bit in the bowl game. Maybe that's the case. But does that give you a little bit of hope that maybe the non-power five can at least play with, if not beat, one of the big boys, Mark?
When you say the big boys, how high are you going up that list?
Well, I mean, to me, Georgia's a top 5 or 6 program.
Okay, well, sure, yeah. The only place I take a little hesitancy is that Georgia was missing quite a few players.
Okay, fair enough.
Like they were in the 10 or 11 range. And obviously almost all those guys were missing for a reason. They're preparing for an NFL draft. So they're at the top of the line.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a fair point. I mean, although I still think that, even with some of the depletion of the roster, I think Georgia, a lot of people still saw Georgia as a pretty good favorite in that game.
Sure.
We both watched them. I mean, Cincinnati very easily could have won. But, I mean, and maybe that's kind of an outlier, and maybe that's not always going to be the case, because we have seen UCF beat Auburn, and, we have seen, instances in the past of it happen. Now, I agree with you, Mark. Is it going to happen more times than it doesn't? No, because, the talent eventually does win out, but I think that they are capable. That's all I'm going with.
Well, if we consider, David, the best team from the group of 5 to always be selected to the New Year's Six, Um, they actually have a winning record against their Power 5 opponents. It's 5-4 in the last 9 outings. It's Boise State over Arizona. It's, of course, as you just mentioned, UCF against Auburn. It's Houston beating Florida State. It's Baylor or UCF beating Baylor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as you get more of the non-power 5, and this goes back to Boise back in the day. Remember, they were able to compete, oftentimes. Now, there's no way you could put them in, a Power 5 conference and they would be able to be competitive. And maybe it's that they're competitive on those, once in every so often occasions too. But I think that if they could just be allowed to maybe build up the schedule, I think we would have a little bit better judge. Like, I think, Cincinnati, although we'll see if Cincinnati's as good this year as they were last year with that schedule, no doubt. So. All right, hey, Mark, you're doing the live stream then again tonight at 8, you said?
8 o'clock, sir.
I will be back again, my friend. You have yourself a good one.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Yep, you take care now.
All right, folks, we love talking college football. And I have so many video ideas, but I'm going to need people to watch them because they're going to take time to put together. So I'm going to put some out there, and if we get the response that we would like, then we'll keep doing them. Scheduling fix, non-conference and out-of-conference. My way to the stack of papers, I'm looking at it right here with my notes on my way too early top 25. Coaches rankings. Boy, that's going to stir up some interest. That's going to stir up some debate. I'm going to rank the coaches. I'll rank them in every conference, and then I'll rank the top 10 nationally. Or maybe I should rank all of them. 130. That would be a little tricky. But we'll rank the top 10 nationally and the 1 through 14, 12, or whatever the case might be in that particular conference. I want to wait for player rankings until we see spring practice. Now that we've got the rosters basically filled out, there's still some more action in the transfer portal, but we've got all the players signed out of high school. I'd like to kind of take in spring practice, and then I will hit the pavement with player rankings. This is going to be the attempt to rank all the players in every conference. Top 5 quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, offensive linemen, etc., on down the line in every conference, and then the top 10 nationally. What else are we going to do? Ooh. Here's another deal that's going to take forever. I am in the process of calculating the results of every non-conference game since 2011, the last 10 seasons. So what I'm going to do there is we're going to be able to judge each conference. We're going to be able to evaluate and rank every conference. So we're not just going to say, okay, the SEC went 75-42, they're the best, and the Big Ten went 57-49, so they're second, or whatever. No, because that's not an evaluation. That's not a legitimate evaluation. You got to see that in 2011, Alabama beat number 23 Penn State, okay? And they played Kent State in North Texas, okay? Then they played these other games. Of course, they played the national championship game that year against LSU, so a conference opponent in the postseason. So we got to add up the record and the rankings and figure all this out. So there's more to be uncovered than just one of the stupidest, one of the most idiotic standings I've ever seen has been this thing called the Bowl Cup, the Bowl rankings, the Bowl standings, whatever it is, on ESPN that they do every year. And God bless me that I'm out of that place that I can say this. The stupidest thing to say, oh, the Mountain West won the Bowl Cup. The Mountain West went 7-2 in bowl play. Who cares? It doesn't mean anything. Who they play. almost every time it was a group of 5 conference that would win that thing because they're not playing the best teams. You know, I see this all the time when I see Ole Miss has this bowl record and Texas has that bowl record. I saw this, some kind of comparison this bowl season. We understand that since Archie Manning played, excluding Ole Miss going to the Sugar Bowl about 5 years ago with Chad Kelly at quarterback, that they won a Sugar Bowl against Oklahoma State, who really wasn't that good. They were good, but not that good that year. That Ole Miss has been going to a lot of Independence Bowls over the last 50 years. So Ole Miss having a certain bowl record and USC having a certain bowl record are completely different bowl records. They're completely different. You might as well say, yeah, it's not even comparable. USC's been playing in Rose Bowls for the last 50 years. They've been playing top 5 to 10 teams almost every year they play in a bowl game. You know, take the teams that we know that are at the highest level. The helmet right behind me, Ohio State. They're playing a top 5 team in the country every year in a bowl game. They're rarely playing a team outside the top 5. So you can't compare their bowl record to Iowa's bowl record. Stupidity. The utmost stupidity. All right. We don't like stupidity here. We're sworn enemies to stupidity. All right. Cheryl, appreciate you being here. Got Christy in the live chat. Go Dogs. We've got Real Talk saying that the Pac-12 and the Big 12 are both so bad that sometimes we don't mention them in the natty discussion. I think that's a little bit overstated, but we get your point. The Rod Farva, Chad Kelly, GOAT rapper, huh? I didn't know that. Yeah, it happens once in a while. You want to get me fired up about something, it's stupidity. It's stupidity and people who aren't logical. If you ever want me to get frustrated on here, actually don't bring somebody on here to debate college football with me that knows what they're talking about, because even though they're difficult to, it's a difficult debate, and I got to be on my best logic to hang with them. It's when you get the idiots that are so moronic that you don't even know what to say, because their argument is so incredibly pathetic that it's just like, I don't even know where to start with this, because I need to teach you all this before we can even debate. So yeah, the scheduling in college football and the playoff system, boy, we're just going to have a field day with that. And if people would watch the videos, I would love to go back in time. I know there's a handful of you that love the dissection of the national championship races, and I love doing that. Maybe we'll give that a shot again. We've already got 1983, 84, and 90 out there, and maybe 2000. So I would like to go year by year. But we did these playoff videos, and nobody really cared about those. I thought those were going to be big. You never know what's going to hit big. I throw a video one out there, there's like 8,000 views, and in the next video there's like 400. And I think the video with the 400 views is better than the video with the 8,000 views. So who knows? Who knows? Going to have some people come in and help me with these kind of things. Because I would love to run a YouTube channel that, in addition to all the nice conversations we have with all of you, and then the beat writers that come on, that I just really grind away at analytics. But Don't know that there's a big audience for that, but that's what I would love to do. I've got another thing started here. Keep starting this stuff. Wanted to take all the writing on that. Good Lord. And I just got started taking the recruiting rankings for each team in the SEC. We started with the SEC. The recruiting rankings going back to 2011, the last 10. I guess with 2021, it'd be 11, but I didn't include them. I'd have to tack on 2011. And basically compare the recruiting rankings with the results on the field. So let's go to the top of the list here. Alabama. Since 2011, Alabama's 78-9, 44-4 in the SEC. 5 playoff appearances, 4 national championship games, 4 SEC championships, 2 national championships. Oh, that's since 2014. I know what I was trying to do there. I was taking 2014 because of the playoff era. I was going back to 2011 because of the recruiting rankings. So 78-9, that's what that's 87 games. That must be since 2014. So this is in the playoff era. Okay, this is in the playoff era that Alabama 78-9, 44 in the SEC, 5 playoff appearances, now 6 playoff appearances. I got to add to this, and I got the whole breakdown. And then the recruiting rankings are 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 5, 1, 2, 1. And so it's not real intriguing with Alabama because the records here and the recruiting rankings here, it's the same. But with others, LSU, I think they're underachieving a little bit. 59-19, 33-15 in the SEC, with recruiting rankings of 8, 13, 6, 2, 5, 2, 7, 15, 5, and 4. Auburn, underachieving. 26-22 in the SEC. That was before this season, correct? 26-22. They went 6-4, so they're 32-26 in the SEC. That's not very impressive. 32-26 for Auburn from recruiting classes that ranked 5, 11, 10, 6, 8, 9, 9, 12, 1, no, 11, and 7 in the country. Almost exclusively top 10 recruiting classes out of Auburn, and they're going 32-26 in the SEC. So I wanted to come up with some kind of metric where I could compare who's underachieving, who's overachieving versus the recruiting rankings. Look at Kentucky. You know, under Mark Stoops, playing some good football. They are only 42-34 in the playoff era. Then they went, what, this year? 4-6, I believe, was the record. 5-6 with a win in the bowl game. So they're about 7 games over 500 during the playoff era as Kentucky, and their recruiting rankings are 36, 50, 34, 22, 38, 34, 30, 37, 34, 25. So anyway. That's like in the last couple of weeks, I've come up with another idea for a channel. I'm not going to let that one out of my mind, though. I'm not going to let that roll off my lips, but I've got another idea for a channel I really want to do. All right. What else in the live chat? Anything else? Anything else? Uh, 6-6 for Kentucky this past year. Well, they only played 10 games in the SEC. They only played 10 games. I think they went 4-6. Then they won the bowl game, 5-6. Oh, we got a call coming in. Oh, we got Mark on here. We appreciate that comment. Tell your friends about Mark, better than rest who just spout off without any research. There you go. Appreciate that. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Davey Thomas with the breaking news of the day.
Oh, boy. What is it?
Bolivia that is taking over Illinois just saw a recruit out of Wisconsin before he goes there. So Illinois is going up ahead that.
Illinois.
And yeah, he took over the head coach job at Illinois.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
So, you know, Arkansas has just deposited to the bottom of that conference. So now that Bolivia is stealing players from Wisconsin, and you know it'll be Nebraska, Minnesota, Ohio State, Michigan, probably lots of Michigan. But I just caught you live, so I wanted to call you and let you know that just broke to me.
All right.
But I can't tell you who it was. It was on the phone. So.
All right. I'll find out who that is, and you'll be happy to know, Navy Thomas. Next week we're going to be breaking out the whiteboard. We're going to be doing some serious metrics and fixing things with schedules and conferences.
Yeah, just put up all the coaches that are gone and put up a list of coaches to be stolen, and we'll go with that, buddy.
Absolutely. We'll do it.
All right, man.
All right, Tom. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.
We've got Brad Bielema stealing players from Wisconsin. And Navy Thomas actually threw, I heard, Ohio State into the mix. Brad Bielema probably, I don't know how successful he's going to be in taking players from Ohio State to Illinois. Don't see that happening anytime soon. But Brad Bielema at Illinois, it's a great story for the Big Ten and for Illinois to give them a little bit of juice, although they had a Super Bowl coach there before and he couldn't do anything. But Illinois' got a proud football past, and they are either in the process or have built a top-notch football facility. So we'll see. All right, appreciate everybody here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. My rundown here is that I'm going to talk Nebraska football at 5:30, but that's going to be a recorded segment, so be looking out for that over the next few days. Some Nebraska football talk. And then at 6 o'clock Eastern time, I got to tell you, folks, you bombard me with super chat contributions here, but you could just give us $5 a month. That's 15 cents a day. That's more, I apologize. It's more like 16 cents per day, 16 times 30, 480. And it might even be pushing 17 cents a day on Patreon. You get the exclusive live streams there. We're going to have one at 6 o'clock Eastern time. Then we're back here at 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight. I've got a special guest. This person may be my favorite person on YouTube. There are about, let me think, 1, 2, 3, wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, and 3. I think there's another one out there. I can think of 4 of my favorite people on YouTube. Now, when I say favorite, not discounting anybody else, like a Pigskin Pete, Uncle Lou, love those guys, tremendous job. But these are more guys that I only know one of them. I'm not talking about people that I know, that I talk to. I'm talking about that I love their channels the most. And we're going to have one of them on tonight. Got out of the shower and just the hair's just not looking good. But anyway, so we'll see you all tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Unless you catch us on Patreon, we need to build up the Patreon. We're doing some good things over there, doing some big things. And so I think you'll enjoy what we've got going on over there, 6 o'clock Eastern time tonight. See you at 8. Special guest. Should I give a clue? You're probably, I would hope, and after my goal is that after tonight that everybody is aware of this individual's YouTube channel, but probably not aware of it right now. But there is, this person is a fan of a helmet that's displayed. All right, right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We will see you at 8 Eastern or Patreon. Grab the link in the description section. Join us on Patreon. Would love to see you over there, 6 o'clock Eastern as well. Rod Farva, I will do that. I didn't have any idea who that was, and I looked him up on Twitter. So I'll try to track him down. I need a good Texas person. Texas, USC, some other spots as well. All right. See you guys soon.